This class is concerned with data, information and knowledge. We will look at the distinction between the three concepts and also how important it is in the context of business. For a start, data, information and knowledge are the subject matter of communications, often used in organizational activities. So communications is the mechanism, is the channel. It's the way in which information and data and knowledge is passed around the organization. So communications is the process of moving data, information and knowledge around the organization. So this is the subject matter of communications. This is what communications is about. It's about moving the data, imparting the knowledge, informing the workers, providing information. It's the important part of communications. Communications is the way in which the data, the information and the knowledge is passed around. The terms are often used interchangeably. However, there is a big difference between data, information and knowledge, as we'll see in a few moments. So it's important to be clear as to what data is and what information is and what is knowledge. And we'll look at one model which differentiates these three concepts. They're very important because they're used for effective decision making. They're not just used for big decisions, they're used for day-to-day decisions. It's how organizations operate. They operate by communicating data and information and knowledge from one section to the next, from one person to the next person. And the organization is really a big mechanism for processing the data, the information and the knowledge. So it's very important for decision making, and it's very important for the day-to-day running of the business. Now let's look at one model that links this. This is called the DIKW model, and we'll see what that means in a second. But this model clearly illustrates the way in which the three concepts are linked. It was first introduced by Russell Ackloff, who categorized the four concepts in a pyramid. So we have four concepts, DIKW, and he organized them in a simple pyramid to show how they're linked. And that's the pyramid. We have data at the bottom, information sitting just above it, knowledge above that again, and wisdom above it again, which gives us the DIKW model: data, information, knowledge and wisdom. At the very bottom we have raw data, and raw data is really not that useful. It forms the basis for information and hence for knowledge and for wisdom, but in itself it's not processed, it's just data. Something needs to happen to the data. It needs to be processed, it needs to be calculated or organized or presented, or it needs to be refined if it's going to become information. Information has meaning. Information is useful. Information is processed data. So there's quite a big difference between information and data. And when we have information, we can use it. We can use information in a certain context. That's what gives us knowledge. We have a lot of information. We don't use it all at the same time. We only use selected amounts of information depending on the context in which we're working. Depends on what we're dealing with. We extract the information that we need and we use it in a context. So knowledge is using selected amounts of information to solve a problem or to achieve some end. And wisdom is when we apply it. We know what information we need, we've selected it, that's our knowledge, and now we know when to apply this, and that's wisdom. So the model is moving from data to wisdom. It's moving from raw data without any particular structure, it's just data that's being collected or being received from some quarter, from statistics books or from government publications, or it could be customer surveys, or it could be whatever. It's just raw data. It doesn't mean anything until it's processed and it becomes meaningful information. Then we can use the information when trying to solve a particular problem. We're using the information in context, and finally we apply it. And that's wisdom. The first three concepts here, data, information and knowledge, these apply to the past. This is data that's been collected. So in that sense, data is historic. Data is in the past. It's what we've collected from the past. We've conducted a survey of customers. Well, that was in the past because we have conducted it in the past, and now we've got the information from that survey, which is our data, I should say. Then we process the data to become information. We calculate the average and the standard deviation or whatever it is we're going to do with the data, and then we can use this in the context of understanding the customers. So all of that is in the past. Wisdom really emphasizes the future through vision and design. It's knowing when to use particular pieces of knowledge. It's looking at knowledge and applying it carefully to look into future events or future situations that may arise, and knowing which part of the knowledge base that we've got can be brought to bear on solving a problem that could arise in the future. So it's more applied. So we have our wisdom, knowledge, information, data pyramid, and this is what links the various bits in our discussion in this session. Now I'm going to look at each of these in slightly more detail. We're going to start with data and work our way across that. So data is raw. Data, this includes symbols or signals such as words, diagrams, numbers, images, sensory readings of light, smell, touch, taste. It's raw data. It doesn't mean anything in itself. It is just data. It's just a diagram or a set of numbers or some images. It's just data. It's not telling us anything. It has no meaning or significance beyond its existence, and can exist in any form and in its degree of usability. So data is just what we observe. We may pick it up sensory through our senses, I should say. We may pick it up by touch or by taste or by smell. It may be something we hear. It's just data. We need to interpret the data. We need to make sense of it. The purpose of data is to record activities or situations in order to paint a picture of an event. Therefore, data is historic unless used for forecasting purposes. So data is in the past. Data, it's what we experienced in the past. We may have heard something in the past. It could be a set of numbers we saw previously. It's in the past. So data is just a set of observations, a set of facts, presumably, that we've observed. But in itself, it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't make any sense. So, in that sense, data is raw. We could have some data like we've got on the screen at the moment. It could say data, which is just raw. Raw means it's not processed. And the data could be, it says, it's red. So we observe it as red, and it's got a number, quite a big number in this case, and it's got a little code, V03S. Doesn't mean anything. It's just data. What does that mean? Red 990.094, etc. What's all that about? It's just data. Doesn't mean anything. We need to move to information. Information is the process of transferring data into meaning. Data has no meaning unless it's been processed in a form that can be understood by individuals and used for a purpose. So, information is processing the data so it becomes useful. It can be understood. And processing it means that it can be used for a particular purpose. We're not just processing the data for the fun of it, we're doing it for a particular purpose. So information must be processed data which is meaningful. It must move away from just being a set of figures or a set of diagrams or just data. It must be meaningful. When it's processed, it must mean something. The observer, the person who's processed the data, must understand what the data is portraying. And it must be processed for a purpose. The purpose may be to understand the data, or it may be a purpose to collect data, let's say from customers, so as to work out customers' expectations or their spending patterns or lifestyles or whatever. But the data itself has been processed for a purpose. The purpose is understanding the customers. The purpose is to increase sales or more effectively market the product. So it's the information uses the data, I should say, uses the data to achieve some understanding, some meaningful interpretation of the data, and it's done for a purpose. And it's interpreted so that it is understood by the recipient. When the data is processed, it must be understood. If it's processed and it's not understood, it's not information, it's still data. So the techniques that are used for analysing the data to turn it into information, these techniques should be understood by the recipient, by the person who's looking at the data. So it's pointless getting a set of data and applying some extremely sophisticated statistical technique that the ordinary person who's going to use the information will not understand. If that person doesn't understand the statistical technique, then it ceases to be information. It's still data. They still have no idea about what the data is saying. So it must be interpreted and understood by the recipient. So we have three components of information. The data must be meaningful, the processed data must be meaningful, it must be done for a purpose, and it must be interpreted and understood by the recipient. Let's look at some examples of information and data. Just quickly go through a few examples. Well, we have the population census, which is conducted by the government every so many years. It tries to collect information about how many people in the country, what their age is, where they live, what they work at, and so on. And when we have the data, which is the population census, then the information could be how many people of a certain age are there. Now that's information. That could be useful. It could be useful in business, it could be useful in the provision of health care. A customer survey results. If customers are surveyed, then it may be possible to work out if customers were happy with a particular product or not happy with a particular product. So it's moving from the data, the general customer results, to looking at what the customer felt about a particular product. That's information. A complaint form. Complaint forms are just data. When the data is analysed, what aspect of the complaint is being discussed? What is the complaint about? Where is there a failing? Is there a failing? Is there a misunderstanding and it's not a failing? In other words, the complaint form needs to be analysed. It needs to move from data into information. It needs to be analysed to see what the complaint form is actually saying. Looking at the weather temperature is okay. It's good. You could say it's 18 degrees outside, but so what? Does that fit the seasonal trends? Is it too warm for the time of year, too cold for the time of year? And does that impact on the amount of particular types of clothing that are put into the shops for sale? Does it influence the amount of energy we use? So the electric companies need to make provision. So we're moving from data, just the weather temperature, into using that data, refining it and using it in a particular context. It becomes information. The same with examination results. Looking at the results, so many passed, so many failed, so many were referred, so many got distinctions, so many boys got distinctions, so many girls got distinctions, and so on. It's just data. But when it's analysed, patterns emerge. In a particular region, so many students of a particular age passed mathematics. Why? Why did that happen? That's information. It enables a deeper form of investigation, a deeper understanding. So it's moved from just the results into interpreting the results and trying to work out what the results really mean. Sales records don't tell us very much. They just tell us that the company sold so much, the shop sold so much in a given time period. But which products sold most? That's information. Which products had positive trends and sales were increasing? That's information. So you can see from what we've got on the screen, data is just raw information, if you like. It's not even information, it's just facts and figures. Information is what's refined and what is useful. It's taking the facts and the figures, processing the facts and the figures so they become useful. That's information. Let's go back to that example we said earlier. We have data, and we have this situation of, we said data is just raw data, it's not processed in any way, and we have this strange code, red and whatever. I mentioned it earlier on. That's just data. Now, information is meaning. Well, the red refers to traffic lights at the end of Silver Street, and the traffic lights have turned red. Now we have information. We know what the red means now. It's not just red, it refers to traffic lights. We've looked into the data and we've got a bigger understanding, a better understanding of the data. We have got meaning, and the meaning is that red refers to traffic lights and they've just turned red. And the code underneath, 990 point whatever, presumably that refers to traffic lights. That's the code for traffic lights. And V03S, well, that could be where the traffic lights are on Silver Street. So we have raw data which we've now interpreted. So now it becomes information. We now know what the raw data means. It means the traffic lights at the end of Silver Street have turned red. We have meaning. Now let's look at knowledge. Knowledge resides within people's minds. It's the collection of information along with experience. So knowledge is in our heads. Knowledge is putting information into context. It's looking at the information. We've got a lot of information in our heads. Knowledge is when we put it into the right context. We have many skills that we can do on a daily basis. We have a lot of knowledge about the world, facts and figures we've picked up, and linkages between certain situations and other situations. We understand how situations are linked. But it's knowing when to use that information. That's knowledge. So we have cognition. What do we know? So we have a whole set of relationships in our heads between situations that we know the information. We know that so many % of the population are in the age group 50 to 60 because the census data told us. Census was just raw data. We've processed it, we've calculated, we've extracted those figures. We now know that so many are in the age group, say 50 to 60 or whatever. So we've worked that out. We have that type of knowledge. And that knowledge is in our heads. We've written it down somewhere so we know the source, we know where to get it. We could also have the intent to act. It's how to use the knowledge. We know certain situations, we know about the situation, we know what the facts and the relationships that are going on about this particular situation. It's when to act and how to act. So knowledge tells us how to act. And understanding why. Why is it that the information is in a certain way? Why is it so many people are in that age group, 50 to 60? Or why is it so many people are in the age group 20 to 30 or whatever? Why is it more people live in cities, and why is it? It's understanding. So we know things. That's our cognition. We know how to do things, how to drive a car, how to look after ourselves. And we know why we should do these things. It's understanding. Knowledge helps people improve their lives and organizations for value creation. Knowledge is selecting the right information and using that information to get results. Data enabled us to get information. Knowledge is letting us select the information that's most useful under particular circumstances. So knowledge is selecting the correct information. Let's go back to our example with the pyramid again. You remember we've got this data which is red and so on, and then we interpreted that as traffic lights. So we got meaning for it. Now knowledge is that we're approaching traffic lights which have now turned red. Now we have the information. We know that the data tells us there are traffic lights on Silver Street that have turned red. That's our information. But now we're approaching those traffic lights. That's knowledge. We have knowledge that we're moving towards the traffic lights which are red. So we've moved further along up the pyramid. Wisdom is the process of applying knowledge through what has been learnt. Wisdom is an evaluated understanding. We have knowledge. Knowledge is selected information. Now, we may have a wide knowledge, but wisdom is knowing precisely which bit of knowledge and what to do with that information, that knowledge. Wisdom is refining the whole process yet again, only it's doing it in a very sophisticated manner. It increases the effectiveness and enables individuals to make judgments and informed decisions. So wisdom is an extremely important selective mechanism. It selects the knowledge that we need. It enables us to make right decisions almost without thought. Wisdom is selecting knowledge, but it's selecting it in a very fast and appropriate manner. It's selecting because the person who has knowledge knows which information is important in that situation. They have knowledge. They know the information that they need to make appropriate decisions. If we look at the pyramid, if we go back to knowledge, we were approaching the traffic lights. Wisdom, which is applied, stop the car. And it's done almost automatically. It's selected in a very routine sort of way. It's because the person has wisdom, the wisdom about driving a car in this context, and knowledge tells the person that they know where they are in the car, they know where the car is, they know where the traffic lights are, they're approaching the traffic lights, that's the knowledge. Wisdom, stop the car. They know if they stop the car, they're doing the right thing, they're going to avoid an accident. If they carry on driving through the red traffic lights, it's dangerous to themselves and to others, it could cause an accident, and it's illegal and so on. So, wisdom is the applied part of this situation. So now we have our full model, DIKW. And that's how the full model looks like. Now in organizations, in order to achieve an organization's objectives, the organization requires people, money, machinery and resources. Economists would say it requires the factors of production. Now, data, information and knowledge are important components in an organization's activities as they must be used appropriately. Data must be processed using the right media so that employees can understand the information. So it's important within organizations that data is collected. Not any data, appropriate data. And that the data is then transformed into information. So it becomes useful. And then it becomes knowledge because the managers are able to extract the appropriate information to solve particular problems. That's knowledge. And if the managers are very skilled, they will have wisdom. They know what the knowledge means, so they're able to plan ahead more effectively. The same way as the driver, when the traffic lights were red, the driver applied the knowledge to stop the car. That was wisdom. Managers can take the knowledge that they've got from the information which they got from the data, and now they can select which part of the knowledge they want to use, and that leads to good decision making. So organizations need information for various reasons. And let's look briefly at why organizations need information. Well, first of all, for planning. The need to plan about resources and activities for effective decision making. Planning needs information. It needs knowledge. Planning actually needs wisdom. It needs good decision making when the information has been found and when there's a set of good information, which is the knowledge base of the business. Then managers should be able to select appropriately. That's wisdom. And should be able to make good decisions. So planning is very important. I should say information and knowledge are very important in the planning process. Monitoring and control. There needs to be control over activities, over resources and plans. Information is needed to assess whether plans are running to schedule. It's important that when a business has made a decision and then implements the decision, that it's monitored and it's controlled. And that means that the knowledge base of the business is kept up to date through constant monitoring and constant processing. It's also important that organizations record transactions. The accounts of the business need to be drawn up every year. For legal reasons, the businesses must produce accurate accounts so that they pay the appropriate tax. But also, to record the transactions of the business is very important. Otherwise, the managers will not know how effective the business is. Is it making a profit or not? So recording transactions is important. And then processing the transactions to extract the information. Which products are selling? Is the price right? Which areas of the country buy more than others? So it's possible to, looking at the transactions, to extract information from it. And performance measurement. It's important to be able to work out where costs occur, what determines the level of costs, what determines the level of sales, what's the profitability of particular products, and how to benchmark the performance of the business against similar businesses, if that's possible, just to see how successful is the business compared to others in the same line of work, in the same industry. How successful is the business? It needs to be benchmarked. That may not always be possible because the information about competitors may not be available. But just generally looking at the performance of competitors, looking at how well they appear to be doing, is a form of benchmarking. And this provides information about the business, whether it's successful or not. So in this session what we've looked at is data, information, knowledge and wisdom. And we've looked at how the three are important. They are very distinct concepts. Data, moving to information. Information is the supply of information within the business. It's the processed data which tells the business how it's performing, or what its sales are like, or what its costs are. And that becomes the knowledge base of the business. So that's knowledge. And then the wisdom is when the managers select the correct knowledge, the correct information, and apply it to make effective decisions. So it's an extremely important concept, inquiry into these three components. After we've looked at these, of course, we need to communicate them, and that's a completely separate subject and the subject of other videos. That's all I'm going to do in this session. I'm going to leave it at that and say thank you for watching.